Hi there, I'm Detective Constable Gareth Jordan, and I'm from the Cybercrime Department of Double Powers Police. And today, what I want to go through is some, if you like, some stay safe protocols, some awareness areas, and what I've seen in my experience and in my day-to-day job of where the problems lie for individuals and companies, and certainly where we're seeing an awful lot of compromises, attacks, vulnerabilities. So you don't have to go through some of the pain and the problems that some of the people I deal with have had to go through. So without further ado, what I'd like to do is just go through some of these safety tips and some of the cyber areas. And again, always remember, if there's a problem, there's an immediate problem, you call 999. The police will not be upset at you calling 999 for something that you believe is a real emergency. Recently, I think some people have thought that actually I won't bother the police, they're a bit too busy, or I'll dial the 101. The 101 is not an emergency number. 999 is an emergency number. And if you believe it's an emergency, it is an emergency. So please remember that and do dial it if you need to. Lloyd's of London have got an interest in securing every business's on the sort of from small companies to huge conglomerates. And Stephen Fry visited Lloyd's of London to actually ask them about the different types of insurance. And one of those was cyber insurance.
What do you specialise in underwriting or looking into?
I'm a cyber underwriter. The latest statistics were that the cyber crime market generates more revenue for the criminals than the drug trafficking market worldwide, which is pretty scary stuff. And we wouldn't insure anyone who wasn't investing enough into their IT security, saying that if a hacker really wants to get in and they're good, the likelihood is they will. So that's the risk that we take on. It's not just personal data that's a target, it's corporate confidential data, it's mergers and acquisitions information, it is medical research data. So they're all under attack.
And that's the whole problem, is that everything is under attack. And what the person I was talking about is basically that it's huge. It's bigger than the drug market. It's one of those areas where I think people don't think that they're going to get attacked by, because of the fact that where they are, who they are. But the fact is that a lot of these people who are trying to get their money don't really care who you are, where you are, whatever you do. And again, it's not just personal data they're after, it's corporate confidential data, it's research data, it's intellectual property, it's knowledge about your company, about your person that they can use to generate money for them. So it's all about, they will attack any area. And just to show that is that yesterday in Haverfordwest, 6 calls in the space of 30 minutes, there were calls from residents stating that they'd had a police officer phoning them and they required assistance to the public. And this bogus police officer went on to explain that the victim's bank accounts are under threat from fraudsters, that there's a employee who is using counterfeit money that's putting it into the ATM so they can then take out the real money from the ATM, and then basically the employees getting all the money from it. Obviously, this is a scam because I'm talking about it here. However, if you're called up and you say it's a police officer, and they say, we'd like you to help you with our investigation because we believe there's a fraudulent employee and we need someone to go and take some money out of the local ATM. Do you go for it or don't you go for it? How do you check these things? So, you have to verify this type of activity. We had one lady and she had got £6,000 out because of the fact that she thought the police were waiting to come and collect it. And she phoned up because of the fact that they hadn't actually come and collected it yet. So these types of scams are happening on your doorstep. That's the whole point. They actually happen. And who's controlling it is the organised crime gangs. It's not just nation state actors that we hear about, but there's organised crime. We saw there that the level of wealth generated by this is huge. It's more than drugs. So therefore, if it's going to be less difficult to do this type of crime, or they can do it from an armchair without having lots and lots of other people involved on the streets where it's far more risky they're going to get picked up, cybercrime is the ideal area for these gangs to start operating in. And the whole point of what we see is it goes from the smallest scam to the largest. And that's the problem, is that people think, oh, it won't happen to me. But some of these simple scam texts that you receive, such as DPD has failed to deliver to your door, or the Inland Revenue are calling you because of the fact they actually want to be paid in gift cards. Sometimes you look at those, you think, well, how on earth does that scam happen? How does that scam get caught up in the public's mindset? How does anybody even fall for it? People fall for it because the fact is it happens at the right time for the criminal, obviously the wrong time for that poor victim. And it can happen to any of us. And I've dealt with people from all walks of life. And I wouldn't say you have to be dumb to fall for these types of scams. That's the problem. People think that they're not going to fall for them. And that's the first step to actually falling for them. So we've got to start thinking about, the diversity and the way in which these are sort of gradually evolving. And also where we live. We think sometimes that because we live in such a lovely, idyllic area, cybercrime doesn't really affect us. The problem with cybercrime is it actually affects us more in some ways because we're far more trusting as a community. We're far more trusting and don't think it's going to happen. So therefore, we're more likely to fall for it. The TalkTalk hack in 2015. TalkTalk were hacked. They were taken down, if you like, or all the files were taken. And the person that actually did that was Daniel Kelly. Daniel Kelly came from Llanelli. And he was 17 when he was arrested. He was convicted at the age of 19, and he's just come out of prison in July 2021. So that's someone who's local, who's actually targeted a large firm. So it's almost a bit of a reverse face. But the point I'm trying to make there is, so what? That leaked information has allowed criminals to get information that they can then gain trust with. So when they phone up, they can do what's called social engineering, and they can get to people by talking to them and saying, oh, is this such and such? Is this your name? Is this your address? Don't tell me, but your account number is this. I'm now going to verify I am with TalkTalk because you're on this specific plan, this specific scheme. May even have some financial information that they could do to talk to them about, because that is part of the foot in the door, gaining the trust. And once the trust is gained, that's when the criminals then carry on and to do other things. So that leaked information is out there. I was with TalkTalk in the time it happened. And so therefore, my details are going to be out there as well. And when you look at the threat, it's quite incredible. The amount of money that we're talking about is huge. And when we look at the fact that how much money is being lost to cybercrime, it beggars belief. And malware or malicious software, such as viruses, those sorts of things, that has just increased exponentially as well. Phishing, where someone will actually send something to see if someone will actually take the bait, that has been phenomenal, certainly through COVID. Certainly over the last few years, it has gained its, they've become a lot better at it, if you like. The sort of prince who's trying to get you to release £1 million that you can have just because he's been injured in a plane crash. Those things have really sort of like gone by the by, or people realize what they are, but people don't realize that that's evolved into the next stage, to the next stage, to the next stage. And so therefore, we're now starting to even get to the stage where ransomware, which is where computers are locked down completely, is gaining a victim every 10 seconds in the world. So every 10 seconds, someone is having their computer system locked down completely, and they cannot get into it unless they pay a ransom for it to get out of it. And where we've got COVID frauds, tech support scams, we also start looking at things like Hackney Council were the victim of ransomware. Redcar were the victim of ransomware. Garmin were the victim of ransomware. Garmin paid $10 million to $10 million to get their systems back up and running because they had been the victims of ransomware. Now, Garmin, $10 million, most likely isn't very much compared to their daily turnover and what they need. So therefore, the 10 million was paid quite quickly. But when you look at that 10 million, where has that gone back into? That's gone back into criminals who can now develop better ransomware for the next attempt, etc. So you've got to start thinking about who is it who's responsible for your cybersecurity, at work, at home, or maybe they're both the same. But who is responsible for it, and what do you know about it? We talked about phishing. There's lots of different types of phishing. There's what's called spray and pray. That's where they send out millions and millions of emails. And what happens is that those emails hopefully will fall on one victim, at least one victim, out of the millions they've sent out. That's spray and pray. We've got smishing, which is SMS texts that go out, phishing. Vishing, which is your phone calls, your voice phishing. And you've got whaling. Whaling is where you've got more important people in a company where they're seen as being important. And what they look at is they say, okay, these people have got their hands on the purse strings, or they will have their ability to pay out large amounts of money. So therefore, they'll go for those. They'll email the PA of the CEO or of the managing director, and they'll make sure that that managing director's just gone on holiday or something, and they'll then pretend to be someone else who is owed money by the company. And in fact, when you look at this, you think, well, how's that going to work? Google have been a victim of whaling several times. So therefore, people in Google, some of the CEOs, have been the victim of whaling, and they've had their corporate employees not knowing whether or not the money is paid or not, so therefore they just paid it. So therefore, something like Google is getting done. You can imagine, it's going to happen elsewhere as well. And then you get spear phishing. What spear phishing is, it's that next stage up from phishing, because it's the whole point of hitting that target when you actually aim for it. Once you know who to actually aim for. So who is the target then? Well, in reality, you're the target, because you've got high profile. And when I say high profile, it means you've got a digital footprint. You're quite easy to find. There's a large potential reward. Now, you might not think that you've got an awful lot of money, but to a lot of areas within the world, that is a large amount of money, depending on what they can get from you, depending on the actual scam. And you've always got to remember that this is their business. Their business is getting money from you by utilizing the cyberspace against you, by using your computer, by using your social networking, by using any weakness they can find to get to you. When you read through that and you think, well, what do I do? I haven't got a complicated system as that, so it doesn't bother me, it doesn't matter. This is a company in Dyfed-Powys that had their system exploited. They'd got in via the remote management monitoring system. They've gone in and managed via that to get hold of their servers, and they have locked everything down. So when that managing director has gone into that company on the Monday morning, they have not been able to get to any of their systems. And ransomware is massive. Ransomware affects companies in Dyfed-Powys. We've had one large company which has employed hundreds of people locked down because of it. And during that time, they had no knowledge of how much they owed or were owed. They couldn't work out what the workers were being paid. And the managing director had to go down to the bank at the end of each week during this time to look at what they paid their workers last week and just write the checks out for them, not knowing whether or not that employee was meant to have that much money, had they done the amount of hours, et cetera, et cetera. We had another company in Carmarthen, and this is what's called a zero-day vulnerability. Because they hadn't patched their systems, there was a vulnerability in one of their computers. And this was actually a production machine running an old system. And the malware managed to get onto that old system. And from that, it could then get onto the rest of the network and then shut the whole system down by encrypting everything. Now, that company actually had a really good backup maintenance, good backup system, but it still took them 2 weeks to get back and running properly so that they knew there wasn't any other viruses or any other malware in the system. Because one of the main problems with ransomware is nobody knows at what stage it came into the system. They don't know when it's been in the system, because if an attacker's achieved full access, it's really hard to know what they've done, when they did it. They could have actually accessed that system 2 or 3 months ago and waited and then pounced. So they don't always do it straight away. So it's quite difficult to understand. So for an IT company, it's quite difficult to say, we can't just restore the whole system now and then you're back up and running. They have to restore it bit by bit and then test it and test it and test it, and then make sure that nothing else is trying to make contact with it. Is their system now calling out to the attacker to say, I'm now back up and running and I'm ready for another attack? The point of your information is it's valuable. It's valuable to you, but it's also valuable to other people. It could just be the fact that you've got hackers or kids messing about. Now, that might sound silly, but kids mess about because of the fact that they think, oh, I'll just buy this little kit off the internet for 10 quid and I will try and see if I can hack something. I'll try and see if I can actually shut something down. It happens. It's just what kids do for fun nowadays. It's one of those things that they don't see the consequences until they've actually done it. It can also be properly directed at you. Could be political or ideological. If you're working in an area whereby the public don't think that you should be doing what you're doing, certainly with the environmental type lobbying now, it could be that you're doing something that's unethical as far as other people are concerned. It could be something that maybe even local people have taken a dislike to. Those are all the areas where people might take a thought and think, well, how can I shut that company down? How can I get back at them? And they don't always go to the gates of the factories anymore and put placards up and demonstrate. They do this. They'll hire someone to hack the system to bring that company down, because that's the easier way of shutting that company down. Sometimes it is a mistake, and that's you have to think about that as well. But it's all other things as well. When was the last time you thought about your website? Could it be taken over? Has anybody got a website with a similar name to yours? Email hacking, that's very big at the moment. Getting into your system via the Office 365 and using the webmail version to then utilize that to actually send emails out. So have a think about how people get into your systems, have a word with your IT people and talk about what's the best way of protecting yourself against these types of things. And what happens when it does go wrong? You know, have you tested it? Have you tested what your system will do? If you suddenly lost contact or you lost your computer today, where's the backup? How do you restore it? How long is it going to take you? What have you lost? When was the last time you backed up? Have you got an IT company that will help? Or do you suddenly go, oh my goodness, I need to find someone who can help me now? You know, it's one of those things that's like you get a burst pipe and you suddenly need a plumber and you think, oh, who do I go to? And then you have to look them up. Well, the trouble is, if your computer system's down completely, how are you going to use it? How are you going to get outside contact? Where is all your information? Is it safe? You know, who knows what to do? Do you know what to do? Do your staff know what to do? The National Cybersecurity Centre produce a lot of literature, and they've got a very good site as well. And I recommend you go to the NCSC site. So if you Google NCSC, National Cybersecurity Centre, you'll find their site, and it's got lots and lots of information. And they've got lots and lots of different PDFs you can download as well. And it goes through a lot more than I'll be able to cover on this presentation. So when we start looking then, who's attacking us? We're talking about the usual suspects. You know, is it going to come through all these different things? Or is it coming through here, the careless user? Now, when I say careless, I don't mean someone who's just like, well, just nothing's happening today. I'm talking about something that just happens. You know, think about yourselves. How many online accounts do you have? When I started looking at this and thought about this, let's say these are the sorts of online accounts that everybody is nowadays going to have. And how many of these do you have each? Well, more than likely, you'd have more than one banking account. It could be for insurance, you've got one, or you could have done maybe an account where you've then got in to look at insurance and you've now been insured with 3 different people, 3 different years running. So you've now got 3 insurance online accounts, if you like, logging into those accounts. And if this here is just typical, that's 60 accounts, 60 online accounts at least. Now, those 60 online accounts, think, oh, well, I haven't got that many. You'd be surprised. Have a think about it. Go through that if yourself, if you want to. That also entails things like specific forums, specific logons for a particular piece of software that you've got. But what happens if one of those is compromised? What happens if one of those gets compromised, such as MyFitnessPal or Under Armour or British Airways or EasyJet or TalkTalk or Marriott Hotels or any of the other companies that have had a compromise? Garmin, we talked about earlier on. If that happens and they're able to get into that account, do you use the same password for more than one of your accounts? So if you're on MyFitnessPal, is it the same password that you use for Instagram, for Tesco, for Google, for BT, for PayPal? That's what I'm talking about. Because if it's the same password, you've just made it really easy for the hacker. They haven't had to guess your password. Your password could have been really difficult to get. But once they've got onto that, they'll then do what's called credential stuffing, and they'll send that through to all these different accounts and see if they can get on with your email account and your password that you use or was been hacked. So use your email address and password, they can then become you. So what happens if you suddenly wake up tomorrow and that is your Twitter account? What do you do at that stage? What happens when your corporate account starts to look like this? Your email account is your most important account. And you've really got to have that, if you like, the most protected, if you like, so to speak. Because if your email account gets hacked, there's so much more stuff that can happen. Your email account is where everything comes back to. And if your email account is hacked, then you've really got to get to grips with it quickly and gain control back again. However, it might be too late in terms of the amount of data that's gone away from it. So if you do nothing else today, have a look, make sure the email account has a separate password to all your other accounts. Because passwords are boring. Passwords are not interesting at all. Nobody likes passwords. Nobody wants to know about passwords. In fact, I've most likely said password and you start to look around for something else to do. You must have gone away and thought, oh, I'll go make a cup of tea now. We're going to talk about passwords. Don't go away, because passwords are the most important part. And I'll show you why. If I said to you, can you give me your password? You know, I'm a police officer. Hopefully you'd say, no, I'm not going to give you a password.
We need to do a better job of protecting ourselves. You know, the most popular password in the United States is password 123. And as long as that's the case, we're vulnerable. So today we sent a camera out on a Hollywood Boulevard to help people by asking them to tell us their password. And this is how that went.
We're talking about cybersecurity today and how safe people's passwords are. What is one of your online passwords currently?
It is my dog's name and the year I graduated from high school.
Oh, what kind of dog do you have?
I have a Chihuahua Papillon.
And what's its name?
Jameson.
Jameson. And where'd you go to school?
I went to school back in Greensburg, Pennsylvania.
What school?
Hempfield Area Senior High School.
Oh, when did you graduate?
In 2009.
Oh, great.
It's like my cat's name and then just like a random number.
Okay. Have you had this cat for a while?
Yeah, she's my childhood pet.
Aw. And what's her name?
Her name is Jolie.
Jolie. So like a password of yours would be Jolie and then a number.
Yeah.
Like number 1?
Like my birthday.
Oh, when is your birthday?
June 12th.
Oh, nice. And what year were you born?
95.
Oh, great. So Jolie, 6/12/95.
Yes.
Got it.
And that's as easy as it comes. That's called social engineering. Someone's asked someone some questions. They've asked them about passwords. They haven't actually asked them the password, although they've managed to get the password from them. A lot of the stuff that you're going to find on the dark web is going to be passwords that have been from breached data sets, i.e. companies that have been breached. They now have these passwords and the email address linked to them. And we're talking about anything here. We're talking about your online accounts that we talked about earlier. And something you can do at the moment is you can actually go onto a site called Have I Been Pwned? HAVEIBEENPWNED.com. HaveIBeenPwned.com. Pwned actually means owned in gaming slang. That's where that comes from. When you put your email address into that site, it's run by the National Cybersecurity Center. If you put your email address into that, it will then show you whether your email address is known to have been associated with any breached data sets. And so I put my one in here, put my personal email address into that, and I come up with all of these. These have all been breached, and they're all things that I've been associated with in the past. These are accounts that I have with my email address. And when we look in there, we can see compromised data. There's here, email address, passwords, email address, IP address, password, username. And that's quite important as well. Usernames. How often do you use the same username and password as well? Those two things go together quite nicely. So should I be worried? Was I worried when I saw this? Because this isn't everything. This is just what they know about. So it's going to have happened on other sites as well. In reality, no, I wasn't worried because the fact that I knew already that these had been accessed, but also I've got a separate password for every one of my accounts and my online accounts. Now, I can't remember many things. So therefore, it's not through me having a brilliant brain and being fantastic. One of it was because of the fact I thought, how embarrassing would it be that Gareth Jordan, who's a cybersecurity protect officer with Berwick House Police, if he did get hacked, and it was because of the fact that he had a dodgy password, i.e. he'd shared it out amongst different accounts of his. But two, I thought, you know what, I need to start looking at making myself secure. And I could not remember passwords. I can't remember passwords. I've got to the age where something comes in, something else has to go out. So therefore, how do I keep track of it? Well, it's up to you how you keep track of them, whether you put them into a little black book, whether you put them into an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document. Even sticky notes that I've got there is better than not having separate unique passwords. I use a password manager, and I found that's really useful for me. The passwords it generates for me, they're encrypted. They're also stored encrypted on their own servers. Will they ever get hacked? I don't know. They might do. However, it's far less likely that that's going to happen than my account getting utilized by criminals if I had more than one of my accounts with the same password. And that's really what this comes down to, is you're minimizing the risk. And so you need to start looking at, how do you do that? How do you keep your passwords secure, separate, i.e. unique? Just because you've got a strong password does not mean that it will not get hacked, because it could be that strong password was with EasyJet when they were hacked. And that password, although it's really difficult, is nothing to a computer. It just stores it, just copies it, and it's now in a list somewhere for someone else to use or to try and use. And you need to start thinking about the fact that your digital life, it's easily opened, because it's opened by passwords. We live our lives with passwords. Nobody likes passwords. I hate passwords, but they are integral in our lives nowadays. So you've got to take action to do that. You're making it easy for criminals if you don't. If you don't make sure that you've got a separate password, and I'm not going to go on about it any longer, you've got to start thinking about it. Another area you could start looking at is two-factor authentication. That's whereby if something happens to your account, i.e. someone tries to get onto it and it's from a different machine, you will get a text message that comes through to you saying, is this you? Two-factor authentication is available on just about every platform nowadays. So look and see that you can enable two-factor authentication. I tried this the other day. I logged on from a different account, a different computer, and Facebook then came up and asked me, is this really you? The same thing with Google. It said, is this really you? Your name was used on this. So that's really good. And I also had to go through my authenticator when I did do it the last time, but it even checked to make sure, was this really me? So using two-factor authentication is really useful. And if you don't know how to turn on two-factor authentication, use Google, ask it the question, how do I use two-factor authentication? Or two-factor authentication in, and then type in the actual application you want it for. And that will take you to the help pages of those programs. People like, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of those areas, they all have two-factor authentication, and they all have help pages designed to help you. And that's, while we're on the subject, use Google to be your internet guru as well. Search, ask the questions. It's brilliant for it. A lot of times people come to me and say, oh, do you know anything about this new app? Do you know anything about this new thing? And I Google it, find out about it, and copy and paste that and send it back to them. They go, I knew you'd know. Well, no, I didn't know. Google knew. I can't keep hold of everything, but people come to me and ask me these questions. I'll have a look at it. That's what we do. We used to have encyclopedias, didn't we? Sorry, aging myself a bit now. But we used to have reference sources that we could go to. Now, Google is a good reference source, but you still have to do fact checking. So always you can actually say, is this true? And you'll be taken to a fact checking type site. So those are the sorts of things as well to look for. And as we move on, identity theft is a huge area for these criminals. That's what they're doing this for. They're doing this to actually get money, but they're doing it to actually take your identity in the first place. And I've been online a long time now, digitally, if you like, and a lot of my information is mostly out there, and it's just being pieced together gradually so that someone at some stage could try and be me. And we need to try and think about what can we do to minimize that. We can't stop it. It's a process. It's in progress, and it has been for a number of years. But we do need to start thinking of negating what is out there. A good example here would be how hackers would work. Boarding passes on airplanes. And here, this would be a standard sort of boarding pass. And when we look at that, what we've got here, we could take that information off the face of that. So if that boarding pass is thrown in the bin, as Murphy Dade actually goes out at New York after coming from London, and a criminal has someone waiting there, and all their job is to go through the bins and pick out used boarding passes. And you might think that's a bit far-fetched. That's not far-fetched. That's what happens. Because from this ticket, not only can they start to scam someone, they can go a bit further and they can start to find out an awful lot more about them to make the scam far more realistic. So here's our ticket again. If I use a QR reader and I look at that quick code QR there, I then get that information. Well, it's not particularly good. However, if I break that down to what it actually means, which you can quite easily do by using these types of apps, and they're all free, that is what comes back out. Now you might say, well, so what? Well, so what on there is, one, I've now got a contact number for this person. I've also got some choice information that I can now utilize against or for my scam. I can phone that person up once they're in New York, and I can say, hi there, is that Murphy Dade? Yes, it is. Hi there, this is now British Airways here. We know you took flight number 6060 from London to New York City. Yes, that's correct. Okay, what we'd like to do is to just make sure, first of all, we're not going to ask you to tell us more information than we need, but we know that you were on seat 34C and you were around about the 260th, 270th person to check in, and that you are actually in economy class. Yes, that is correct. Okay, right. I'm sorry, but we've got some bad news for you. We know you've got it down in your choices as a vegetarian. However, you were given a meal which had some meat in it, and we can only apologize for that. Now, Murphy Dade is thinking compensation. Wow. Now, totally believes this is British Airways calling, totally believes that they're going to get some money, totally believes in the authenticity of this call. That is the phishing done. That is the spear phishing done. He has now been targeted, harpooned, caught. Anything after that, he will believe what they say. They could lead him into the fact of logging onto his account, logging onto his bank account to make sure that the money is going into it, and then inserting some sort of software where they can then actually clear his bank account out. Those are the sorts of things that happen. So from a simple thrown away airline ticket, you can see how scams can then grow and grow. And I'm not making this up. This is what happens. Do a search for yourself online. Have a think about who you are, what you do, what you used to do. If you're a company, Company's House has an awful lot of information about you. I can go into Company's House as a civilian individual, anytime I like, Company's House, type in the name of a company, and from that, and even Company's House state, you can get details about a company for free, including all of this. Now, I can then, from that, go through those company records, look at returns, look at the incorporation PDFs, look at the signatures that are actually on there, and copy that sort of information and start to become you, or get enough information about that company that I can start to devise another way of getting into that company and conning them out of their revenue. Because we all leave a digital footprint. We're all online, we're all doing things, we're all putting stuff out there. And every time we set up a new account or download a new app, we're giving a little bit more about ourselves out to what's out there. So the next video is going to show us a scam, if you like, that they did to try and get people's information by offering them a free coffee but just saying, give our page a like on Facebook and you'll get a free coffee.
Oh, hiya, can I help?
Can I have a hot chocolate?
What's the name?
Joelle.
What was the name?
Alex.
Alex. There you go, Johnny.
Cheers.
If you like our Facebook page, we give you a free hot drink and a free pastry.
We have a new like for Damien. We have a new like for Damien.
Hey, Carly, are you standing by?
Standing by. Hi there, can I help?
Yeah, just liked your Facebook page.
Okay, I'll search Facebook now.
I'm searching Google.
Have a phone number.
I've got his email address.
Okay, Carly, are you ready for information on Damien?
Yep, I am.
Mother's maiden name is he banks with
Hey, Carly, this is the girl coming in now with the blue scarf.
What's her name? Nicholas.
Nicholas. His date of birth, 7th of May. She lives at 38A.
Just be a couple of seconds.
2 children, age 4 and 6. Previous address. She's got the postcode.
Yep, got it. Damien, age 26 and a fitness instructor.
How do you know what that?
Brody, who goes to UCL. Martin, who went to South Thames College. Assistant psychologist at Great Ormond Street.
How did you know?
That is... I don't really understand.
Oh, better?
You know I'm a Christian as well.
Oh, yeah, we know everything about you, Martin. Thank you. Nice to meet you, Anna from Russia.
And it goes to show us how much we put out online. Oversharing is a national pastime. Criminals love it because they can actually get so much information about it. You know, you could say, I know what you did last night, because the fact is, people post on Facebook, they post on social media, on Instagram, on all these different social platforms, what they got up to. They're giving away information about themselves, whether it be the date, time, place, what they look like, all sorts of things that can then be used by criminals to get at them far more easily. But you always got to think about, are your staff, are your friends and family putting this sort of stuff out as well? And what does it say about your company or your particular viewpoints or things that you hold dear in terms of, as a company, do you really want other people seeing that your employees are out doing this sort of stuff? So you need to have a word and start thinking about, you need to start shutting these things down or not posting certain things online. And when I say not posting certain things online, I thought the other day, okay, social media, what does that mean to people? And we talked a lot about Facebook, Instagram, all sorts of stuff like that. Strava is a fitness program. That is a social media platform. You might not think it is, but it is. Because all of these programs and these apps give out data about ourselves. So I just went into Strava and I thought, I'll just have a quick look and find someone who I don't know anything about. And I found this person, started to do a little bit of a research on them, thought, okay, I'll just have a look at what they've done. Oh, they've got a nice bike. Oh, that's the map of where they went with all the pictures. Now, if I was a criminal, if I was a burglar or a stalker, this would be really useful to me, because I could then start looking at, oh, where does that start and finish, that ride? Well, that start and finish is either their house or a friend's house. But I could start looking at more of their uploads and see whether or not this is a constant place that they come from. And from that, I can then Google the actual roads. I'm now in Google Maps. I find out a little bit more about it. And with Google, if you do a right click on the place, it even gives you directions to get there. And if I want to, I can drop the little man down there and I can even see where they're from. It's accurate. It gives me so much information. It gives me, no matter what I want, depending on what I want to do, I could be looking to either burgle a house, steal the bike, or stalk the person. And all of that is available to me just from those uploads. Because the fact is that that person has not looked at their privacy settings. They need to look at their privacy settings. They need to get on there. And this happens with all of the apps. Most of these apps want to share as much as they can about you. That's why they're social network apps, because the amount of data they get, they can then sell, and then it goes to marketeers who then sell that further. And so if you want to do a campaign to people who ride road bikes within a certain postcode, these are the sorts of people that they would then put those advertising out to on their social media pages. So therefore, they want as much information. So therefore, they leave their settings wide open, and it's up to you to close them down. So think about what are your privacy settings on each of your apps, not just Facebook or Twitter or Strava, but certainly things like WhatsApp. On WhatsApp, have you looked at whether or not in group chats you can be added by anybody or only contacts? Because those are the things that are open on those sorts of things. So start looking at those sorts of ways as well. And as we go through from that, the next thing to do is, in terms of constantly checking things, is thinking about when you get an invoice. When you get an invoice, is it real? Now, what I mean by that is, does it really come from that company? If you get told, oh, actually, we're just changing the account numbers and the sort code, next time you pay us, can you just pay us to these ones? Just make a note in your settings. Or maybe you just get an invoice that you're expecting and it just has the account number and the sort code, and you don't even think twice about it. Always check, always make sure as to who that's come from, where it's come from. Because what we're finding at the moment is that criminals have managed to get into some people's emails, and they're allowing themselves to get in there to actually read what the emails are doing. So ask your IT company, ask your IT specialist to look and make sure you haven't got any rules or filters. Or if you're technically minded, have a look at your rules and your filters and make sure there's nothing in there that you didn't put in already. And this goes for your webmail as well as your client. So you might have your client or your application that's on your computer, but go onto your webmail and look and make sure that nothing's happened there, because sometimes webmail can have rules put into it which do not affect the client side, so you wouldn't see it. However, on the webmail side of it, they're there, and people can then get onto the webmail because they've got your password because it's been breached in another area. You didn't have two-factor authentication on, and you're not being notified when new people log into it. So therefore, they now are sitting on the cloud part of your email, and they're able to see what's going in and out, and they can actually be you. So they can then start sending these things out as though they were you. So what about your insider threat? What about the people? What about the area that we talked about earlier on? It could be that people have got it in for you, have got it in for your company, a disgruntled employee. Could be something like that. Or it could just be someone's made a mistake. What do they know? What do they know not to actually send out checks, not to pay invoices, unless two people have actually double checked and made sure that it's actually from that person? Because most of the time, the insider threat comes from all of these. It could be any of them. It could be the fact that oversharing that we saw earlier on. It could well be that they're in debt and they're being exploited. They could be exploited because their gambling habit or drugs or sextortion. Sextortion is where people are tricked into getting nude online, enjoying themselves with who they think is someone who's interested in them on the other side of the camera, and then the camera turns off, they say they filmed it, and they're now going to blackmail them with some pornographic images of what they've just taken. When you think about it on that side, it's first of all thinking, well, who's going to do that? A lot of people do it. We are getting most likely 4 or 5 calls per week of people who are actually suffering from sextortion. So it goes to show you that there is that stuff out there. It could be that they're just unaware or they're lackadaisical. Poor cyber hygiene could be the problem. And all of these things just give that criminal the edge. They get that hook in there. They're now using them. They've now got the ability to actually use that information, and they can now turn that employee back against you. Employee theft is there. What do you do about your staff joining policy? What do you do about leaving as well? If a staff member leaves, what is the policy? Do you walk them out the door immediately? Or do you say, okay, you can work here for another month? What are they doing on the IT system during that time? What are they taking from you? Is there anything in place that makes you see whether or not they are taking all of your contacts? Are they utilizing the IT systems for the wrong purposes? Do they have too many privileges, which allows them to get to different areas of the network that they don't really need to? Like, can they install software? Can they install malicious software? Can they install spying devices so that when they leave, they can still keep an eye on your company? Those are the sorts of things. check the backs of the computers. Are there any keyloggers, like little USB sticks that go into the back of it? Let's start saying, you know, everyone's going to go, oh my goodness, he just tells all these things, and it's all like James Bond stuff. What I'm saying is, you've got to be aware that these things happen. You've got to realize that this is now part and parcel of what people do. And although it might not be nice, and you might think it's far-fetched, you'd be surprised how many times I've investigated crimes where just this sort of thing has happened, where someone has left the company, they've gone back on the weekend to see one of the staff members who doesn't know they've left the company. They've actually said, oh, I'm sorry, I can't get into my account at the moment. IT seems to have locked it down. Well, yes, they've locked it down, because the fact is that they no longer work there. This person doesn't know that, and they say, I just need to get a couple of bits and pieces off there. Is it possible that you could just log in and I can then get onto the network and get my stuff off it? Yeah, not a problem. I'll go make a cup of coffee while you go and get your stuff. And they download stuff at that stage. So your employees need to know about other employees, what's happened to them. Those are the sorts of things. You know, also, do your employees know what is expected of them? What is allowed, what's not allowed? What's the social media policies we saw earlier on? What have you actually got in place that will actually sort of make sure that's actually going to happen? And what about things like backing up your data? When did you last back it up? How do you back it up? Can you retrieve it? Is your backup permanently online, so that then, if it is online and ransomware strikes, what happens? Does it lock the rest of your system out at that stage? Ransomware, and I'll come back to this now, is because of the fact that people, a lot of the time, don't have decent backups. Ransomware can put their company under. They can destroy the company. There's no recovery if you haven't got a backup. Can you build your system back up again? Or do you pay the extortion? Do you actually pay the blackmail that they're actually going to extort from you without any guarantee that they're actually going to give you your files back or your company back? And when it does come back online, how much malware is going to be in there that they can then just do that again? And so therefore, you know, ransomware is not nice when it happens. You've got to clean everything out. You've got to start from scratch again, or a good backup, or one that you know has been backed up properly. So where do you go for advice on these types of things? You know, I've talked about the National Cybersecurity Centre. There's ncsc.gov.uk, lots and lots of really good advice on there. And I would have a good look on there. It does things for personal, it does for businesses, family. There's lots and lots of different sections, and it's very much up to date. And they also do a lot of these types of PDFs up there, like the 10 steps to cybersecurity, that you can print out as A3 and put on the walls and have a look at things and make sure that people are aware of them, even using them as part and parcel of your internet policy as well. You know, financial fraud, the FSA, all these sorts of things have some very good sites on there, and they have very good advice as well. The cybercrime sort of area has become so big that they're now set up a cyber resilience centre, which is now being sort of rolled out across Wales, so that therefore, if you've got something that you really don't know how to handle, you can get in touch with the cybercrime or cyber resilience centre, and they'll actually give you some pointers, give you some help in terms of where you could go, what you could do. They're also using things like volunteers from universities to help and make sure that they can give you more advice. It's not always free. There are times where they actually say to you, we can actually do a phishing survey for you, i.e. where they'd actually phish your employees and see how much they respond back. Some of that stuff is free. Other things that you might say, well, look, I don't know anything about my firewall, I don't know about upgrading this. They would then give you advice and help, and most likely put you in touch with people who could then help you. As a police, we're not advising you to go to anybody. We're not advising you to try this person or try that person. We're saying you need to get safe, and you need to make your own decisions. However, what you've got to think about is you can't just carry on and hope for the best. So just to stop and think is most likely one of your best piece of advice. There was a campaign called Take 5, and they just said, stop, take 5. And I really like that. Take 5 seconds, take 5 minutes, take 5 days. Just think about it. What is the situation? You know, someone phones you up and says, hi there, I'm from NatWest Bank. and you know I'm from NatWest Bank because the number on the back of the number that's actually being shown on your caller display is the number you've got on the back of your debit card. So you know that go check it now. That's the number I'm phoning you from. Well, a bank would never phone you from that number. All they're trying to do is elevate their privilege, elevate their trust to you. So just think about those sorts of things. If that actually came through and someone said that, that's the last thing that would happen. You need to actually put the phone down, wait 2 minutes. But if it's a landline, you have to wait 2 minutes because they could still be holding that line and just playing a dial tone down it. Then you actually phone up your proper number, and then you can actually say, did you actually phone me? You've got to tell other people as well. You know, other people won't have had the privilege of having these sorts of information. We've gone through quite a lot of information in quite a short space of time. And the last thing, what is the best antivirus? That's what I get asked an awful lot. Well, I always say to people, the best antivirus is you. Yeah, don't click on that link. Read the link or type the actual address you're going to in there. Clicking on the link might take you to a site that you think looks authoritarian, looks authoritative, but it's not. It might look like the right site. It might be something you got through and said, your Microsoft license is expired, or we need to verify your Microsoft license. Please click here. You click on it, and it goes up to what looks like the Microsoft site, and it says Microsoft username, Microsoft password. You type in the username and the password, your password and your username has just been collected by criminals. They are now going to go onto your Microsoft account and try and get into it. That's how it works. Don't take your clothes off in front of the computer. I know I said talk about sextortion, but it is a real problem worldwide. And sextortion works. That's why they do it. So the best way to stop it happening, that's it. Remember, it's a business. Always remember that they are not involved. The criminal is not emotionally involved with you. The criminal does not care about you. They only care about the money. It's a business for them. This is how they make their money. And always, if it seems too good to be true, it always is. So don't just think, I can make loads of money at that. I will be able to do this. This is going to be a great offer. Why is that software so cheap? Why are you actually getting that software from different sites to where you normally do? However, it's so much cheaper. Most of it because it's been pirated and they've then repackaged it with other malicious software. So when you run it, you don't realize you're now sending out signals to other criminals so they can actually now follow that breadcrumb trail, if you like, to your computer and then start to carry out their criminal tendencies on your computer. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope enjoyed making the right word, wrong word, but it's been informative. I hope it's been something that's been illuminating, but it shows you that the criminals don't just give up. They don't just say, we'll try one thing. They'll try everything, whether it just be a scam phone call, whether it be a text message, whether it be a really sort of complex email format where they're actually getting to you. They will try everything. So you need to have your wits about you. You know, government grant schemes, inland revenue schemes, gift cards being purchased so you can pay off inland revenue. That's another one that we haven't even covered. There's so much out there. You do have to be careful and do keep an eye on things like the National Cybersecurity site and also keep an eye on the news to actually find out what the latest scams are. So thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and I'll hand you back now.